Hey biscuits, welcome back to the channel. How is your gorgeous morning going? I hope that you are feeling fantastic this month. So I want to talk about a subject that I have been researching because you know that this is a budget-minded year for everybody. I think we all feel the pinch of inflation, and just the way that the economy is going is so funky dunky. And so I love finding ways to do the whole FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early. Can I retire early? No. Do I want to? Yes. And so I love looking into options for ways that aren't like gig economy, because that can be a really difficult way to actually make any side hustle money, but ways to leverage assets you already have, right? So would you Airbnb your vacation rental, your own house, while you go off and travel? So there's something called house hacking, and probably a lot of you biscuits know about that. But it's where when you live in your house, you know, you're renting rooms out in your house, or you convert, mother-in-law suite, and you rent that out on its own. And it's where you are trying to make money from your house that you actually live in, right? And for me, that's really hard to do because I have a family. I work from home, and so I can't really have people just coming in and out. Right? It doesn't really work as well for me. And my kids are loud and grumpy, and who on earth would want to have them as roommates? They're terrible roommates. They're very messy and loud. But it got me thinking that if we want to do some good traveling this coming winter, because we all know that I do not like the Pacific Northwest winters. And those are coming up soon. October. Let's be optimistic. Maybe winter won't start until November. So would I Airbnb out my house while I am traveling? So this is what I've been doing the research of. These are some of the things that I found that surprised me, both in good and bad ways. Okay, first thing I did research into was just how much work is it. It's a totally different banana if you are renting out something that you only go use occasionally, or maybe it's just an investment property that you only rent out. If this is your home, you have to think about the fact that for me, my kids' rooms have to be completely cleaned and devoid of toys. We have to take away anything personal and lock that up. All the sheets and pillows and stuff have to be separate. What things, like how much work. It's basically like a mini move each time you do this. So it's a ton of work. So that was my first. It's an obvious one, but it surprised me when I really talked to anybody that does it, just how much work it is. It's a huge amount of work to prep. So if you're going for like a week trip, does that really make sense? I don't think it does. That's going to be my honest opinion. Now, it might vary for you, but for me, prepping an entire house to be ready and de-homed so that it's ready for somebody else to stay in for a week or two trip just isn't worth it. So then I looked at, how long term would I have to be renting something out for me to make it make sense? And I think it's like a couple months, honestly. I'd have to be willing to take a couple month trip, which I'm not opposed to. But right now my son is just settling into a homeschool routine with homeschool classes at a co-op, and he loves it. Obviously, he's on summer break right now, but in the fall, winter, I'm like, ooh, don't want to disrupt his schedule just so that I can get out of the gloom. I have not decided on that. So that's really something that I've been doing research on. But I don't think it's worth it short term. I really don't. I think that if you had a separate space that you could rent out, that you didn't have to like move all your stuff out of, it would be different. But the fact that we would have to prep our entire house, I think would have to be a long-term thing. So I'm still considering it. I'm still thinking about it, because I really like the idea of not leaving a house vacant, and I like the idea of house hacking. House hacking has been something that I've wanted to try for ages. Back when I lived in that little condo that you saw in all our videos when I first started vlogging, I tried house hacking. I got a roommate for a short amount of time. Like, she wasn't supposed to be a long-term roommate. She was just there doing some graduate school studies, so she was only going to be there for a couple months. And that went horribly. It did not go well at all. Yeah, it was not a good experience. So I did not house hack after that. And then the next place I lived had a really strict HOA. So I couldn't really house hack, even though I wanted to, which was a shame because that was when we were actually, it was just me and my son, so we could more easily go, and he wasn't in any kind of school because he was so little, we could more easily like go for a month somewhere. So that was like my prime window for house hacking, but I couldn't because of the HOA. And here where we're living now, I'm really tempted to try it, but the amount of work it would be is just insane. So I think I'd have to price point it at a thing that actually makes sense for the amount of work that I would have to put in per time away, but I think it's doable. And the next thing I'm thinking about is furnishing. So this is what I figured out. Okay, so you have to look at furnishings differently when you're gonna vacation rental your house part-time while you travel. So I would not want like a really expensive, amazing piece of furniture in the house that I was worried about a guest ruining, because God knows I'm rough on furniture when I travel in Airbnbs or vacation rentals. Not on purpose, but just living, right? Like it's not your stuff. You just aren't thinking about it the same way. And I think I'm a pretty conscientious traveler. Like I really try to be tidy and keep the kids in line when I'm in somebody else's space. But that's really something to think about. So as I've slowly furnished my house, I have not spent a lot of anxiety about, oh, it's got to be like this high-end stuff. I've kind of furnished it with, in the back of my mind, thinking I'd really like to try this house hacking. So let's keep it furniture that's easy to clean, that's easy to adapt to what somebody might need, that would be friendly for visitors, and it doesn't give me like a panic attack at the thought of some stranger letting their dog sit on my sofa or something, you know. Another thing to think about is how many beds are going to fit in your house, because how will you rent out your space? So I've debated renting out my whole house, or I've debated renting out rooms in my house. And I think it depends on the size of your house and the space and like where you're at. There's a whole different vibe to it. But it's made me think about like, oh, what size beds would I want in this room and here? And a good example of this, and this is where it gets tricky house hacking, is do I want to build a family home, or do I want to build a home that works well for house hacking for renting out as a midterm rental when we travel or elsewhere? And those, what I have found, and this one kind of disappointed me, is that those are two really different ways of designing your house. So for example, my daughter, she's a little toddler. I've been wanting to design her room for a toddler room, but I realized if I did that, you can hear sirens, living in a city, is that if I design her room as a toddler room, I can't rent it out. Not really. Like, I can't rent it out by the room. Maybe it would be helpful if it was for the whole house, but if I'm trying to do midterm rentals by the room when I travel, I can't really turn her room into a toddler room. It kind of needs to be neutral. So it takes away some of the hominess inherently, because it's two different things. And that is probably, if I'm being honest, the biggest thing that has stopped me from wanting to house hack and do midterm rentals while I travel, is I really want our home to be a sanctuary. And I want it to be a place where my kids have wonderful memories, and they don't remember that mommy wouldn't let us have a fun room to play in when we were kids because we had to rent it out occasionally. And so I really sat down and I thought with these questions, you know, I wrote them out and I looked at like, what are the answers that I'm discovering? And I think it's a really hard thing to do when you have kids. It's totally different if you are a couple or a single person. It's so much easier to do. But with kids, there's this added complexity. So I'm still on the fence about whether I would Airbnb midterm rental my house out when I travel. I am leaning towards no, because when I ran the numbers, it just didn't make that much money to go to that extreme amount of work, and then the rest of the year when we aren't traveling, have the house be set up that way. Because when I'm thinking about furniture, I'm not just thinking about, oh, my kids' furniture. I'm thinking about having to buy extra bed frames and mattresses so that rooms have the max occupancy, so that people feel like they're getting a good value. And there's all these complexities to it, you know, extra dishes, extra forks, so that everybody has everything, that then we have to store year round. So I'm leaning towards no, if I'm being totally honest, after crunching the numbers and running it. If I were going to do full term, like full time, renting it out, then I would totally have fun with that. That would be great time. Kind of like my glamping business. We have a great time with that. It's so much fun to run a little small off-grid kind of glamping world. But if I had to live in my glamping tents and then turn them over and prep them for people, That would drive me crazy. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the house hacking right now. Is I love the idea of house hacking. I think it's so brilliant in this economy because I live in a really high cost of living area. Their houses are just insane. Like crazier prices than you can imagine for just really basic houses. I don't live in a fancy neighborhood. I don't live in a fancy home. And it still like is a huge portion of my budget just to keep a roof over our heads in an area where my neurodivergent kid can get the services he needs, which is why we live where we live. And house hacking, I thought, well, maybe that's a good alternative, kind of like lessen the burden as the main breadwinner in this family. And I really think that maybe it's not all it's cut out to be. I feel like we watch all these shows and we hear all these great stories about, oh, make a living, Airbnb in your places. And what I'm seeing is the tide turning on that with regulation and saturation in the market, we're just kind of hitting a point where like it doesn't always make financial sense to do, which is a shame. I love real estate as a concept for building security in your life financially. I think that's wonderful. But I have seen such a shift in the last, let's say even 5 years, in how real estate is being used and consumed and bought, and like what entities are buying it versus people, that I find it very tricky to get the numbers to work. Totally possible to, but definitely harder to. And house hacking, I think, is extra tricky if you can't house hack your family home as is. So I would say if you live like a minimalist lifestyle in your family home, it's way easier. So it's made me reapproach how we're living our lifestyle is, are there things that we could do that would make this an easier transition where we get all our family home stuff, but we can still house hack. And I haven't found a solution for that yet, but I'm still working on it. And I wanted to share this with you because it's a topic that I've been reading a ton about and watching videos on, trying to figure out, is it for us? Is this a good idea? We love the idea of travel, and we love the idea of hosting people. That I don't even mind that. I love being hosted by great vacation rental hosts, and I think it's delightful. But are we up to it as family? That's the question. Drop in the comments box. I would love to know. Would you house hack your own family home when you travel? Would you do it when you are in the house too? What would your preference be? Or would it be like an absolute no-go? You aren't doing it. I would love to know. I'm going to see you over on our beautiful Patreon community where we are doing a summer-long ancestral self-care. Oh, we are connecting with our primal inner being, and we are finding that joyful happiness that just blossoms all summer long. Come along to Patreon. Come play, come have fun, come find the burlesque in your self-care and the self-care in your day-to-day life.